Cleared AY for 9213, know that.
Clear, got it.
The drizzle from the previous night had gone away with the clouds and had left behind a very cold forecast, as we found out around 8 a.m. on Tuesday, March 14th, as we stepped out of the car to shoot NS Train 24A. 32-degree weather would greet us on this cloudless Georgia morning back at the Cordele Rail Park. Welcome everyone to part 3 of an eventful trip to Central Georgia for a break from normal high school life and to see all the rail action that's offered. So we depart the hotel just after 7 a.m., with our first catch coming just 20 minutes after showing up to the Diamond. Norfolk Southern Intermodal Train 24A is crossing now, with traffic from Jacksonville Simpson Yard to Inman Yard in Atlanta. This would be our only source of action for about an hour, as maintenance crews on CSX had the line until 9:30, finishing up their overnight duties to make way for the daily parade of southbounds in the morning. So it'd be the Class 3 short line that would step up with a train of their own, as the Heart of Georgia eastbound local would get permission over the Diamond.
Heart of Georgia, JD.
Go ahead, Hog.
This is the Hog, Cordele, need a 6 line eastbound.
Alright, here we go. You right up there at the light?
Yes, sir, we got a clear one now. Thank you, Hog.
Alright, thanks, guys.
From what I've heard, the Hog has to manually dial up the JD dispatcher to get permission over the Diamonds, as he controls the interlocking signal on the Hog. Since CSX has higher priority than NS here, all the JD has to do is make sure that no NS trains are approaching and line it up for the Hog. Since the maintenance of way equipment was just coming back to Cordele now, the Hog would have the Diamond immediately. Three EMD GP38s would power this train into Cordele, sporting their vibrant orange and yellow Genesee & Wyoming scheme. While this is the Heart of Georgia short line, its parent company, Genesee & Wyoming, repainted the Hog's engines to match the rest of the G&W lines throughout the US. While many rail fans dislike the G&W paint for repainting classic old paint schemes from years past, I find it a treat to see these bright, clean engines hauling mixed freight. After the Hog cleared, a steady stream of CSX's MOW equipment and crews would roll into town, tying down on the old interchange track for the rest of the day, reopening the line south of Cordele. Unfortunately, a crew north on the line at Vienna would be in the middle of their shift and would clog the line until the afternoon. However, the hottest train on the subdivision was approaching, so the trackings would be mandated to clear up for IO-25.
Yeah, 25 and 747 south, clear Cordele interlock.
Just after 11 a.m., and the first CSX train of the day would finally come through after a few hours of waiting. Two massive GE locomotives would barrel south with plenty of intermodal traffic for Jacksonville, as a mid-train DPU would aid in the pulling of this almost 13,000-foot train. That mid-train distributed power unit would be CSX 7026, a rebuilt AC-44 now called a CM44AC. This unit at one point was CSX number 166 Built as an AC-44CW in May of 1996 and rebuilt at CSX's Huntington shops in 2019. It's one of many engines that have been rebuilt by CSX, as it's cheaper to rebuild an engine to last a couple more decades than to buy a completely new one. Only minutes behind IO-25 would be our train of the morning, X20314, Louisville, Kentucky to Baldwin, Florida, loaded auto racks. This train would catch our attention the night prior, as one of CSX's SD-70 Maces would end up leading this train south. He'd get a crew in Manchester around 7 a.m., and by 11:15 he was rolling south with a long string of automobile commerce for the Florida Peninsula. This train would hit the defect detector at South and Cordele and spit out 478 axles, and after subtracting the 18 total axles from the 3 6-axle motors, that leaves us with 115 auto racks. Now, most of these auto racks are bi-level cars, meaning that they have 2 decks capable of holding 10 automobiles each. That counts up to 1,500 individual cars on this train. If you multiply that by the $40,000 that is the average of each of these new cars, this train altogether is hauling $46 million of automobile commerce. Now, that's just an estimate, but as much as auto racks are known as low priority freight, their cargo is some of the most valuable that roam the CSX system. Another 30 minutes would pass, and as the sun would fully come out, clearing away any leftover clouds from the overcast night, the weather was now a solid 52 degrees with a cloudless sunny sky. There simply is no better weather in the world. But it can get even better, like in this instance, when a train comes through town. This would be X64713, freight for Waycross heading south on its last leg of its multi-state trip from Chicago. 4 CSX locomotives would power this train, but not 2 alike. Led by an ES40DC, a 1990s era AC44 would trail second, with an even older CW40-8 behind it. And in the 4th position would be an E&D GP40-2, dead in tow, likely headed to the engine shops in Waycross. With 647 out of the way, we began our drive northward towards Vienna, where we wanted to see some unique photo spots more secluded from the populace of I-75 exits. However, we'd make it about 5 minutes north of Cordele before we'd hear a train call a clear signal at distant Taras heading south, so we'd whip a quick U-turn and pull off at the next road crossing we'd find. This is the curve that turns the Fitzgerald sub eastbound towards Cordele, where it crosses the NS after paralleling it south from Vienna. And this is M606, our surprise southbound freight heading towards, you guessed it, Waycross, Georgia. And another YN2 DPU, my favorite. I don't know if our radio wasn't working or these crews were keeping quiet, but by the time we'd pull into Vienna, yet another southbound would surprise us with 2 YN2 motors leading. where they belong. This would be M22113, freight from Birmingham to Waycross via the Lineville and Fitzgerald subs. To me, this is a good old-fashioned freight train with a kitchen sink of cars and 2 motors on the head end pulling, no DPUs. However, as refreshing as this catch would be, this would be our last catch for a while, as traffic along the Fitz would come to a dead stop for the next 2 hours as track crews had the line until 3:30. So it was sitting on lawn chairs outside of our car along a barely paved farm road in the middle of vast fields of crop. Pretty relaxing in the cool air, as the quiet of the surrounding farms would give the birds the chance to sing their songs and the rabbits and squirrels time to frolic in the fields. The Fitz would be quiet as well, as an old SEL whistle post still stands its grounds decades after it was first placed here. The different sized perpendicular lines on each side indicate the length for horns to be sounded as the tracks continue north. 2 long blasts, a short, and another long is what this post tells the crews, known as a standard crossing horn sequence nationwide. You'll hear what I'm saying in just a second. In the meantime, 2 southbounds were approaching, but would hold in the Lilly doubletrack as after 2 hours, traffic was beginning to pile up. Northbound M514 would be the reason for the halt of said southbound, and in a few minutes he'd round the corner, perfectly executing the posted horn pattern. We'd move back to Cordele for the parade of southbounds that would be soon to pass, and to begin planning a shot that would require a meeting point and a place to set up. But before all that, we had plenty of trains to catch. Leading the way would be G405, loaded grain for Waycross from Evansville, Illinois. At Waycross, this train turns into G903 that shuttles the train to Valdosta along the Bow Line and returns the same day. Something that CSX officials try to avoid is making extra trains instead of dropping at the customer with the mainline crew. However, the Thomasville sub is a completely different line, and like other subs, they have their own designated crews. Waiting just up the hill for G405 would be our good friend NS151, making the Valdosta freight, today with foreign power yet again. The 2 Class 1s would be taking turns over the diamonds today, as M602 was lined through next, with more West Coast power. This train is coming from New Orleans, where all 6 of North American Class 1s all operate, constantly interchanging traffic from the port and the various yards that reside in the heavily industrial city. Hence the reason for foreign power being a normality on this train. The march continues south as I-143 trundles by, running on approaches as he'd be right on the tail of M602 and be diverging into the siding at Cordele to meet our train of the day. As we've said before, this is daily intermodal service between the facilities of Fairburn, Georgia to Jacksonville. 3 GEs would power this train as they'd crawl into the siding, barely fitting with their almost 9,000 feet of train. Our train of interest would be nearing town, but not quick enough, as NS 249 would get permission across the Diamonds only a few minutes prior to our northbound. And into the parking lot of a closed industry we'd go, along with 2 of the Cordele Police Department's finest officers. Our train, M605, would have the spirit of law enforcement locomotive number 3194 leading its northbound trek today. So we thought it appropriate to get the people that this engine honors out for a quick photo shoot. When this locomotive was unveiled to the public in August of 2019, Eric Henderson, the technical director for CSX and the man behind these Pride and Service locomotives, said that these engines would be worth the money and time even to make one first responder smile. So Dakota and I thought it would be very cool not only to get our photos, but also get the 2 cops to see the engine that is painted in their honor. After a few minutes of framing our shots and talking with the cops, around the corner would come M605, proudly led by CSX 3194. And I think that the crew saw us and the cop cars and gave us a special salute with their unique RS5T horn. With 605 continuing north, we'd bid farewell to some of the 2 coolest cops one could ever meet. Another huge thanks to Officers Kendricks and Banks for coming out and making our trip just that much better. But with M605 rolling north, we'd follow in close pursuit. Into Lilly we'd go, getting caught by 3194 barreling north, using every bit of track speed through here. It would be a tough chase down 2-lane roads behind cars that, let's just say, weren't in a hurry. However, by the time we'd roll into Oglethorpe, we'd be well ahead of 605, giving us enough time to look around as golden hour commenced. This is the location of the diamond that crosses the Norfolk Southern's Albany district, running from Macon to Albany, Georgia, where it interchanges with the Georgia-Florida Railroad. The line only sees 2 daily trains, with a thrice weekly local, so we knew that we weren't going to see any NS here today. On the NS, this diamond is known as North Oglethorpe, however on CSX, it's the south end of their 4,849-foot siding named after the town. And calling the distant to Oglethorpe siding would be M605, now rounding the corner in perfect afternoon light.
M605, 14 engine 3194, clear, south Oglethorpe, main to main, out!
temperature quickly dropping, we'd begin our 30-minute drive back to Cordele. However, we'd never make it back. A surplus of trains had piled up from the march of southbounds earlier in the afternoon, and now they were let loose and pounding north. First stop would be in the middle of dueling siding, as the headlight of X222 would crest the hill, and in moments he was here, with a long string of auto racks for Birmingham. As the sunset would display a full range of warm colors, we'd drive south into Lilly, where we'd stop unexpectedly after taking a look at the signals. 2 approaches would be lit for each main as more northbounds entered the picture. With decent light here, we'd set up and wait, as our first northbound would be flying through Vienna as we got our equipment out of the car. As the last light of Twilight would fade into darkness, the number 1 track signal would display a high green, and so out of the darkness would come M601. More merchandise for New Orleans, and more foreign power trailing. After 601's 10,000 feet of train would clear, we'd hear of L729 quickly approaching, calling a clear at Vienna while 601 passed. So we knew he would be here soon. What we did not know was that this was the train that was to go into the hold on the number 2 main for a higher priority train to pass on the number 1 main.
Teddy to L729 13. They're going to meet you in Lilly. I just called them. They're going to head that way. So plan on following 26 from Cotton and then duck into Dillon to get recruited.
In a few minutes, L729 would crest the hill, and for running through an approach, he'd be rolling.
Approach light limit, L729 north, number 2 train north. Hey, you right here. I just had to get his ticket. We out here riding, we rolling.
Almost 200 rock cars would be the load on today's L729, barely fitting between the crossovers at Lilly and the end of the double track at Cotton. With the green now lit once again on the number 1 main, our final train of the day would call a clear at Morgan, about 2 miles down the hill from us. It would be evening intermodal train IO26, tonight using every bit of the 60-mile-per-hour track speed through here.
Please can't come Lilly. IO26.
With IO26 gone into the night, we'd call it here. It had been another good day out, but the temps were now dropping into the 30s, way too cold for an average Floridian. But when we'd get back out for our last day, it would be even colder. But for now, in Lilly, Georgia, this is Christian from Multicolor Films. End of transmission.